Are we slipping into a pastor crisis here in the United States? In this episode, I'm joined by Jimmy Dodd, founder and CEO of PastorServe. PastorServe comes alongside pastors and ministry leaders through coaching, consulting, crisis care, and soul care. Jimmy is also the author of several books, including the best-selling Survive or Thrive. Together, Jimmy and I look at some recent research and assess the current realities of pastoring here in the United States. Then we look at some incredible places of hope where you can find support and encouragement as you serve in ministry. Are you ready? Let's go. Hello, friends, and welcome to another insightful episode of FrontStage BackStage. I'm your host, Jason Daye, and every single week I have the privilege of sitting down with a trusted ministry leader, and we dive into a conversation, all in an effort to help you and pastors and ministry leaders just like you embrace a healthy, sustainable rhythm for both life and ministry. We're proud to be a part of the PastorServe Network, and every single week, along with the episode that you're watching or listening to now, our team also creates a toolkit that you can download, that you can work through yourself with the ministry leadership in your local church to really dig more deeply into the topic that we discuss. And you can find that at pastorserve.org/network. There you'll find a lot of different resources, including a ministry leader's growth guide, again, with questions for reflection, things that you can work through yourself and with your ministry leaders. So please be sure to check that out. And then at PastorServe, we have a heart for pastors and ministry leaders. Over 20 years, we've been serving you, coming alongside of you. And our team of trusted, experienced coaches would love to offer you a complimentary coaching session. So if you want to have someone to talk to process through some things, maybe make some progress on some of the things that you are wrestling with as a pastor, as a ministry leader, you can get a complimentary coaching session with one of our coaches. You can find out more details for that, register for that at pastorserve.org/free session. So be sure to check that out as well. Now, if you're joining us on YouTube, it's good to have you along. Please take a moment to give us a thumbs up, to hit the notification bell. And also in the comments below, please drop your name and the name of your church. We love to get to know our audience better, and our team will be praying for you and for your ministry. Whether you're joining us on YouTube or your favorite podcast platform, please be sure to subscribe, to follow. We don't want you missing out on any of these great conversations. And I am very, very excited to be joined by a good friend, the founder of PastorServe, Jimmy Dodd. Jimmy, welcome to FrontStage BackStage.
Thanks, Jason. Great to be on with you as always.
Yeah, brother. So it's so good to have you. What's kind of cool, right about this time as we're recording this, we're hitting right around 1 year of FrontStage BackStage. Week after week, hanging out with pastors and ministry leaders. So it's good to see how God has used this ministry and this resource over the last year, and we're looking forward to many, many more conversations in the years to come.
And we are very excited about it. You've done a fantastic job. I mean, you've just done such a great job. We've had such great conversations, and it has been very, very insightful. As a matter of fact, I just spoke with a guy last week that just said, I just don't want to say this out loud because I have a lot of friends who do a lot of podcasts. But he said, yours is the best. It is the best podcast. It's just like a cut above everybody else's because I learn so much. I grow so much. And so I am just immensely grateful for you. It's always interesting because I'm asked every so often, it's kind of weird that you're the CEO and founder and you don't do the podcast. And I'm like, well, let me explain to you why I don't do the podcast, because Jason is experienced. He's smarter than I am. He's better looking than I am. He's more well-spoken than I am. And that and about 15 other things, I think he's probably the right person to be the host. So, you've done an amazing job. We're so proud of this podcast because every week I listen to it and I'm like, okay, that was powerful for me. I feel like every week there are things I grow and I learn, and so it's been really rich. I'm grateful for you and just everything you've done.
I appreciate that, brother, and it's a joy to be a part of this. And God has brought some really cool guests on. We've entered into some amazing conversations over the last year, and it's a privilege and honor to be a part of that. So thanks, brother. You know what's kind of interesting as we kind of look back over the past year, um, just kind of thinking of how a lot of the conversations that we've had on the podcast have touched upon, what we're experiencing, obviously, as pastors and ministry leaders. And a lot of it has come out of, the pandemic. The pandemic was such a huge thing. And all of the things in addition to the pandemic. I mean, we had racial tensions, big racial tensions dealing with political tensions, right? Political divisions, and just the climate has changed so rapidly. Then you throw let's throw a global pandemic on top of all that. It just craziness, right?
Right.
And we know as pastors and ministry leaders, because we do this day in and day out, working with them, coaching, mentoring, consulting with, church teams, staffs, and everything else, working with pastors and churches going through a crisis. I mean, this is what we do at PastorServe. We know that the pressures and everything, and just the challenges that pastors have faced. And I think that we all were praying and hoping that, man, once the pandemic, we get a little further away from the pandemic, certainly things will kind of shift a little bit in the world of the pastor here in the U.S. And yet, Jimmy, Barna, our good friends at Barna, just released a new report, a new survey research that they had done. This is fresh, just a few weeks old, where they surveyed pastors right kind of in the midst of the pandemic. And as the first year of the pandemic, they went back and resurveyed. Mm-hmm. And actually, what they learned was that rather than, hey, this was kind of a bump in the road and things are moving back up, that actually that it has decreased. Pastoral confidence has decreased. Those pastors who say they feel very satisfied with their vocation as a pastor, or very satisfied with their ministry at their current church, those have decreased. From 2020 to 2022, continuing to decrease. Not really the numbers that we were hoping for, but honestly, Jimmy, you and I have a lot of conversations. We're not completely surprised by these results. So, Jimmy, talk to us a little bit about kind of the state of the church and pastoral confidence and those things that pastors are really wrestling with and what we see happening right now.
Yeah, gosh, it's a great question. And I think that there are some that think, okay, we thought that this would just be a big kind of like a bump in the road. And it's very clear now that this was not a bump in the road. I think that what this was, I think it's a lot like Christmas. I think that Christmas is oftentimes it's like a big magnifying glass. Because if you're in pain, it's worse at Christmas. I mean, like if you're depressed, it's worse at Christmas. If you have just lost your job, it's worse at Christmas. If you have cancer, it's worse at Christmas. But if you're happy, I mean, like it's magnified at Christmas, man. And like if you're in love and it's a new thing, and that's magnified at Christmas. And so I think it's a magnifying glass. But I think that there are those things that are there, and they're always underlined, and the Christmas magnifies them. I think that the pandemic was a magnifying glass, and so I don't think that we hit this bump in the road and now we're back down. I think it's been on the way down for a long time. And I think that the pandemic, it just magnified it. It's just, no, these things have been there and these trends have been there. And these have been underlying things for a long time as we watch this over the years. And I think that the pandemic was just that big magnifying glass of, no, this is actually really bad. And I think that the magnifying glass is going down now. And yet it's still there. It's like, well, I was depressed before Christmas. I was really depressed at Christmas, but I'm still depressed after Christmas. And so I think it's, well, you know what? It was trending down before the pandemic. It magnified it, and it's still trending down because I think that there is widespread discouragement. There is frustration. There is disillusionment. There is, I hear over and over again, it's like, man, I did not sign up for this. I think that there are expectations on pastors, which are massively unrealistic. I think that those have grown over the years, that has not gone away. Now that the pandemic is slowed down, there's still those expectations. It's a long list. And so I would say that the trend has been there for a long time. It was just magnified, but it's still been going in like the wrong direction. And I think that you could make a really strong argument. It's been going in the wrong direction for decades and decades and decades.
Yeah. Yeah, and what's interesting that magnification and even a bit of an acceleration to a
Yeah,
degree. So I think it magnified it. I think it also accelerated some things that were already inevitably happening
yeah,
as we're
that's good.
slipping into post Christendom. When we look at across the pond at our friends in the UK and in Europe,
Right.
who are definitely living in post Christendom, and we were kind of moving in that direction, and it almost seems like the pandemic accelerated that movement as well, and kind of pushed us further down the road than maybe we would have been. So that combination of magnification, acceleration, really has put us in a place where, as pastors and ministry leaders, and serving local churches, the work that we do, coming alongside pastors, really the challenges have always been there. That's the thing in ministry. You and I both served for decades as lead pastors ourselves. Challenges are always, that's part of ministry. Part of
Right.
ministry is because the enemy does not want us to be effective in living out the mission of God, right? I mean, that's we've got the enemy against us. So there's always these challenges. However, they have, like you said, been magnified. They have accelerated. One of the things I
Mm.
think is somewhat fascinating is we can have these conversations, and people even watching along right now, if you're a pastor, you're probably like, oh my goodness, this is horrible. Thanks a lot, Jason and Jimmy. But the reality is there is great hope in the midst of this.
Yeah.
As much as we see and as much as we feel, right, as pastors, as ministry leaders, as much as we feel like our confidence in our vocation, our confidence in our satisfaction in ministry, where we are right now in our current ministry assignment, our satisfaction in the vocation of being a pastor, even though that might be waning, it does not have to be that way. We know this, Jimmy, because we have coaches all across the country who are meeting with pastors, encouraging and seeing great growth and great things happen in the midst of challenging times.
Right.
So Jimmy, I would love for you to speak a little bit to we kind of understand the crisis that's coming up, and again, we're getting to the hope, everyone. So hang in with us. But Jimmy, you and I talked. You shared recently we're in a call and a meeting with some other ministry leaders from across the country, and you were talking a little bit about this crisis, and you likened it to what we're seeing in policing right now. And I thought that was such a great. When you said that, I literally am taking notes as you were talking, and I was like, "That's such a great example." So help us kind of think through and reflect upon what we see happening in the pastoral field, the vocation of pastors, in relation to like what we see in policing.
Yeah, yeah, and I would say that there is some really good news on the way in this podcast. At least I hope. So don't just think, "Oh my goodness, this is all bad news," because I think that this is actually a bit discouraging. But I think that there is a pastoral crisis that we have not yet actually seen yet. I think it's coming, and it's going to come in some waves which grow bigger and bigger. Because right now there's a crisis in the police force, and the crisis is that they have lots and lots of empty academies, because you have more and more police officers saying, man, I don't want that role, because it just feels like a lose-lose. It's interesting, and I don't know exactly when this will air, but it's interesting, because I think that the just like the crisis in Nashville will do more to help the police force than like anything for, oh my gosh, for years and years, because it's the first time that we've seen, oh yeah, that was absolutely the right way to do it. They're heroes, that they're amazing people. Because I think that you've had this tremendous discouragement of people saying, wow, the last thing in the world I would want to be is a police officer, because it's all criticism. There's almost no thanks. It seems like, that there's more and more to fund the police and all of these things. And I just would not want to be that person. And so now you're seeing cities that are saying, hey, listen, we're in crisis because we have got retiring police officers and people leaving, and we don't have the young people to step into those roles now. And so we've got more and more gaps, and those gaps will only grow over the years. So there's this massive crisis in the police force. It's the same thing right now with pastors. I mean, like, enrollment has gone down in, school after school after school. And I mean, that there have been some big Bible colleges and seminaries that, I mean, over the past, only about 10 years are about half as big, because there has just been this growing sense of disillusionment with pastoral ministry. And so you've seen more pastors say, hey, listen, I don't know if we can find anybody to actually step into my role. And I'm about to retire. I was just with a pastor from a big denomination, and he said, we're in trouble because to be, actually in our churches, you have to go to school at our schools. And we have to change that rule. We have to, because we don't have the people there right now. And we've got more and more just of these open pulpits in some really key churches, and we can't find people who have gone through our process. So we're going to have to change our rules. But I think that that's a growing thing. It's like, I think that there are more and more young people that think, why in the world would I want to be a pastor? Because my pastor said, let's keep our masks on. And there were so many people that just jumped on me and were screaming and yelling and vile and on and on. He said, okay, well, let's take our masks off. And then there was another group that was screaming and yelling, and you don't care about people. And I think that there were just a lot of young people that watched that and said, wow, I don't think I want to be a pastor. I don't think I want to put myself in that place. I think that there's a crisis coming. And you hope that, like Nashville, you hope there's something that's going to be so positive for pastors that it's just going to, there's going to be this, gosh, that was a great story. I think I do want to be a pastor. And so, the thing that we see actually, Jason, is that we do see some great stories. We see some amazing stories with pastors. The thing that's oftentimes hard is that so many of those stories are confidential that we can't just share.
Right.
But we do want to just say that there are some great things with pastors happening. There's some amazing stories, that there are some stories of just massive transformation in lives and in overall communities and cities. And so we want just to really, really encourage young people. This is still a high calling. This is still a great calling. We encourage you that if you felt that call to go towards pastoral ministry, because we desperately need that.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. And, it's interesting because even before the pandemic, we were in the U.S., we were behind the population growth when it came to church planting and having pastors serving. So we were already, in this position where we needed more ministry leaders. We needed more pastors serving across the country because the population was outpacing the churches and the ability to serve. So and then you throw all the other stuff on. So we have pastors who are retiring. We don't have as many young pastors coming in. But the beauty of the kingdom of God is that God is continuing to call people into ministry. And throughout the history of the church, there have been challenging times to be a pastor. I mean, this is like something fresh and new that suddenly, our generation is witnessing.
Right.
This
there
has
were
been
things like plagues and crusades and other. Yeah, exactly.
Persecution. I mean, where you were literally being thrown to lions. I mean, so there have been some challenging times. So God is still faithful. God is still calling men and women into faithful service, into ministry, to serve the kingdom. And that is why what we get to do, Jimmy, and our entire team at PastorServe, is so vitally important. We see that we can come alongside of a pastor when they're seeing these pain points, when they're seeing these issues with less satisfaction in ministry, and the confidence is waning somewhat. They're feeling burned out. They're feeling, what are ways that we can come alongside of pastors to really help them navigate those challenging times?
Yeah. So, I mean, like at the way back when, about 22 years ago, we did a very, extensive work just to you speak with, you scores of pastors. And the thing that we found is that those pastors that thrive in ministry, they have got a team that like actually surrounds them. And they have a boss, a trainer, a coach, a counselor, a mentor, and just some really good friends. And it's interesting because I think that we came to a point where we could almost actually predict a major fall or like a big crisis just like in a pastor's life, because I would hear things like, well, you know what, it's a staff-led church and I'm the lead pastor, so I'm kind of the boss. So I really don't have a boss because I'm the boss. Which in one sense mean I don't have a champion because I'm trying to be actually everybody else's champion, but I don't have anybody that's actually champion for me, which leads to all sorts of issues. And as far as training, I'm the one that kind of speaks to our staff, and so I kind of do the training. And you know what? I don't have a coach because I just don't think that anybody's at my level, and I would want to have somebody that's actually advanced, that's way, way ahead of me, which you just kind of laugh at and think, I'm glad that I mean, you could go through sports and business and everybody else and say, that's not the way the rest of the world thinks, that I mean, like every great golfer has a coach.
Right.
And every great golfer could beat their coach in golf, right?
Yeah.
So why do they have a coach? Because they realize you need to have outside eyes and an outside voice that can watch you and say, hey, I think that things could be a lot better if you would just do this or that. And yet I think there's oftentimes the pastors just don't actually understand that. Then I hear, you know what, I would go to counseling, but I think it's a waste of time because I think that God wants us to always kind of, look forward and not back. Which you think that's a sad perspective, because I think that we do have to process some things in the past because we've all got some hurt and some pain. Then I hear, you know what, I used to have a mentor in college, but gosh, you know what, I think that we actually lost touch about 15 years ago. And if I'm completely honest, I really don't have any peers. I don't have any really, really close friends. We know that person is ripe for a fall. Just because they're isolated. And Pastor Serve was birthed in 1999, but it was conceived in about 1986 because I was on staff at Grace Chapel, and I was there with a well-known pastor, Gordon McDonald, who everybody knew, and he was like the big thing for pastors in America, and amazing speaker, amazing author, all of those things. And he had a moral failure. And that was a hard thing for me because I was on the inside of that. I was on the team. I was on the staff. I was right there watching it. And that's when it became very clear to me, wow, he is surrounded by scores of people and he was completely isolated. And I think that there are pastors that we make, and it's a bad thing to do, but we make assumptions of, wow, they're surrounded by people.
Right.
I guess that's a good thing. Well, just because you're surrounded by people doesn't mean that you're not completely isolated, because I think that we can hide our hurt and our pain and our emotions and our guilt and our shame and insecurities. I think that we hide those things, and it's just absolutely critical to have people speaking into our lives where we can go and be completely honest about those things.
Yeah.
And just on the side, because I'm always asked this question, it's like, okay, so you actually have a book out there, boss, trainer, coach, counselor, mentor, friend. Who's your boss, trainer, coach, counselor, mentor, friend? I have all those roles filled. I have all of those roles filled. I mean, I have amazing people in my life. I have a great coach who, man, speaks things to me that are tough and hard, but man, it's just a great process with them. I have mentors that you speak into my life. I have a counselor I see on a very consistent basis. I mean, I have these roles in relationships. I've got friends that ask me the really, really hard questions in life. And so I hope that we don't just talk about this at Pastor Serve, but that we actually model this at Pastor Serve. I think that that's critical because words are cheap, right? And
Yeah,
it would be very easy to say, hey, do all these things, and yet my life is out of control. And so I've got these roles in my life, and I'm really, really grateful that I have them, because I'd be lost without them.
Yeah, that's important, and a lot of this comes to relationship, and I love the fact that, Jimmy, that you brought up that oftentimes as pastors and ministry leaders, we look like we have a lot of relationships, and we do, because we're shepherding a flock, and
Right.
and we have colleagues, and we have a ministry team, whether it's whether we're at a church where we have paid ministry staff or we have volunteer key ministry leaders, right? And whatever it is, we have this sense that there are people in proximity to us for the most part. Most pastors in
Right.
churches across the country. So, however, oftentimes as pastors, we tend to feel like we have to kind of be on all the time. We have to be setting the example, for everybody. Therefore, we cannot be human, right? In some ways, our humanity can't be exposed because we have this role, and yet that is furthest from the truth when it comes to authentically shepherding people, authentically
Right.
living a relationship with people. You can't kind of put on the mask or kind of fake things or suppress things or hide things. And yet oftentimes as pastors, we do that. And it's not always, Jimmy, it's not always in some nefarious way. It's not always
Right.
like, oh, we're
Right.
trying to hide. Oftentimes, and I'm sure those of you watching along or listening along, you can reflect on your own lives and think oftentimes we do that in a sense of almost responsibility. Like we need to set the tone. We need to set the example, and therefore we don't want anyone to see cracks in our life.
Right.
And
Yeah.
so that can become insidious, and it put us into this isolating place where even if we don't go through some major moral crisis, our hearts and our souls can shrivel up to some degree. And this is why we feel dissatisfied.
Yeah.
This is why we feel burned out, because we don't have those life-giving relationships, right? Can you speak to us
Oh,
about that a
yeah.
bit?
I mean, that was my life story, especially in like the mid 1990s, because I was in a fast growing church and you get, I mean, like attention because you're in a fast growing church. And so you're asked to do things. And I was the most miserable I mean, I was in a terrible place because I felt like I can't show any cracks and this church is growing fast. So I've got to be the guy that has his life together. And I didn't want to talk about any issues in my marriage or my parenting or my thought life or my lustful life or whatever it might be. I mean, I didn't want to just mention those. And so it was just go, 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 go. And it was sad because I found my self-worth very, very much in the church that everybody actually applauded. Man, it seems like you just have your life together. And that just fed the beast.
Mm.
And it just became worse and worse to a point where I was just mentally, physically, spiritually exhausted. And I just was not smart enough to see, man, I'm in a really bad place. And then it's a long story, but the thing that really snapped me out of it was my son, who was about 11 years old, said, I don't know what I want to be when I grow up, but I know what I don't want to be. I don't want to be a pastor. I don't want to be like my dad. And every dad longs for, I think, especially their sons to say, I want to be just like my dad. And gosh, I want to do things just like my dad. And my son, who was just a small child, saying, I want to be the opposite of my dad. I don't want to be. And I thought, and that was my wake up call of, you know what? I have walked down this road for a long time. I have tried to make sure everything looks so perfect in my life, and it is an absolute wreck. And that's when God brought 5 amazing men that spoke gospel truth in my life. And I just finally just became much more open about my feelings and my shortcomings and just all of these other things in my life. And it just allowed me to say, gosh, I'm broken. I'm as broken as anybody in my church.
Right.
I mean, I need God's grace as much as anybody in my church. And that's when God used that to actually start Pastor Sir, because pastors begin to say, huh, you seem like a safe guy to talk to, because I know you talk a lot more about your own brokenness, your own guilt, your own shame, your own fears, all of these things. And you seem like a safe guy. And that's kind of what actually launched Pastor Serve. Is I think that there are pastors desperate for a safe place to go and just be real and honest and just say, man, here's what's going on. But I think that there are still so many pastors that won't reach out to anybody because shame, I'm telling you, Satan loves shame. And so many pastors are in the grip of shame because of secrets, because of all these things in their past. And there's so much shame. It's like, I can never tell anybody. And that's one of the primary lies of Satan. Don't ever tell anybody your secrets, because they will reject you and they won't like you anymore. And man, that's a lie from the pit of hell.
Yeah. And that's vital for us as pastors, because the shame, oftentimes we think of shame related to some deep sin, right? And it could be, right? I mean, we know that there are pastors who are serving who are hiding some sort of, but sometimes that shame is just like, if people knew that I didn't have all the answers.
People knew I did that in my quiet time this morning.
Right, exactly. If people
knew I watched this show on Netflix. Oh, right. Exactly.
Simple things, right? Yeah. Simple things that all of us experience. So the value of having a safe space, you've said that multiple times. The value of having a safe space, I think, cannot be really overlooked in anyone's life, especially in ministry, because that safe space to share, hey, this is some of the things that I'm just wrestling with, whether it's deep seated something, or it's just wrestling with navigating, I've got teenagers now and I'm trying to figure out how to do this, you know what I mean?
Right.
And if people knew that I snapped at my kids, like I did yesterday, they would think differently. I mean, just the reality, just life stuff that we bottle up, we hold on to, rather than processing through. And that just, as we said before, that just really eats at our inner life. And the beautiful thing about Pastor Serve, and Jimmy, what you've done over 2 decades now, is that you recognize that there's lots of great coaching available for how to be a better preacher, right? Or how to develop your staff, or how to discipleship pathways in your church, or outreach in your community, whatever, right? Like, which is all vitally important.
Yeah.
And our coaches all provide those things, right? Exactly. But the distinction of Pastor Serve is, we know there's so much more to pastoring than just the tasks and the functions and the strategy and the ministry pieces that we think of, right? That there's this entire backstage of our lives, that personal side, that really, if we do not have that, and we're not consistently and intentionally working on, the backstage, the personal side of our lives, our relationships, our emotional health, our mental health, our spiritual health, physical health, all of those pieces, then we can easily become dissatisfied with ministry. We can easily become burned out. We can easily, consider tapping out. All of these things can happen, and you have seen that. You personally have experienced it. We've worked with hundreds, probably thousands of pastors now, who've gone through these similar things. And so, this safe space of having a coach to just kind of unpack with. Talk to us a little bit about the kind of the value of that coach, because that's one of the big things that we offer is, a coaching relationship. Talk to us a little bit about that safe space that's not connected to your denomination or your ministry network or whatever, and just the value of those conversations.
Yeah, gosh, that is so good. Yeah, just because a coach is a place to go, where it's going to be safe, it's going to be confidential, but it's going to be challenging in the fact that they're going to ask you some questions that might make you feel actually a bit uncomfortable, but they're going to probe into the front stage and then also things along the backstage, and they're going to bring a perspective and ask you questions to maybe open up some doors of your life that you haven't opened up in a long time. I think that it's just so strange how my coach will ask me questions, and I'll just kind of think, all right, I think you just asked me a question, but I think that's a layered question, and I think that kind of starts me to peel back some things, and that takes me down to a place where there's a lot more questions, and that's going to cause me to do some hard work, just on my soul and my spirit and my life and my self-worth and my mental health and my just all of these things. And so I'm just very, very grateful for a coach that I have given permission to ask me those hard questions of life and just begin to peel back just all of those layers. And there's times in which it's not fun. There are times in which I walk out and think, gosh, I'm exposed once again. But it's a great thing to be exposed and to still feel loved and accepted and cared for, and know that my self-worth is in Jesus. My self-worth is in Jesus. It's not the ministry, it's not the church size, it's not all of these different things, but my self-worth has got to be in Jesus, because that is the one stable thing in my life. That's my one rock. That's the one thing that is always very, very consistently there. And so I would think, man, I've got to have that coach in my life, because they take me to places that I just wouldn't go there. I just wouldn't go there. And they go to some very, some very tough places, but I welcome it. And it's, gosh, it helps me immensely as a person, as a leader, as a husband, as a father, on and on and on. Just as a child of God, it helps me immensely.
Yeah, and the coaching gives you that opportunity to express some of those frustrations that you might have as well,
Yeah.
that you
Oh, yeah.
can't really just express with everyone else, so you can process through some of those, just some of those emotions, right? That if we bottle them up and we can't say, hey, here's some frustrations that I'm having right now in, ministry leadership in our local church,
Right.
like, and you can talk through it, and then the coach says, well, have you considered this, or what about this, or maybe the way that you're presenting yourself,
Right.
maybe spurring on some of that friction, or so then
Right.
so it's this whole idea of getting to health, and that's what we think of as when it comes to coaching. You talked about
Yeah.
a professional golfer having a coach is because they want to progress in their game. They want to do as best they can. And as pastors and ministry leaders, our calling is much bigger than winning, 18 holes of golf, right? It's eternity. And so the idea that we can help grow and develop as people, as children of God, as leaders, as shepherds, as pastors, is just something that helps us overcome those days when it isn't so fun, when
That's
there
exactly
is
right.
a big challenge, when there there are things that are happening. Having a relationship like that and having someone that you can be open with and having someone speak into your life gives you that a greater ability to move through and process through those days that are really, really rough.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And you know what? It's very interesting because my coach knows that he's a part of this ecosystem. And so there's times in which we go deep and he says, all right, that's a big one for you. I think you need to process this actually with your counselor, because he knows I have a counselor.
Right.
And he says, okay, we're at a point, I've probably gone as far as I can go. But I think you need to talk these things through with Rick, who's my counselor. And it's like, okay, I'll put that on the agenda for next time I have a counseling meeting. But he knows he's a part of this ecosystem. And I mean, like, he loves his role in that, but he knows that he's not the only one.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. And so I guess kind of the one of the pieces of hope, not only is God calling people into ministry, not only is Jesus with us through whatever we might face, not only is the Holy Spirit sustaining us, but God invites us into community with others.
Yeah, that's right.
And that sense of community is not something that that we could or should overlook. It's something that we should lean into. It's something that we should embrace. It's something that is a gift from God. And so we really need to look at those opportunities and those relationships in our lives to see how we can grow and develop as we serve the kingdom. So
I don't even know why I'm on this show, because that was gold right there, Jason. That should be the quote from this show.
Thanks, brother. I appreciate that.
Jason Daye right there. Because that was good. Yeah.
Awesome, my friend. Well, times are challenging, but times have been challenging. So
right. They've been challenging for a long time.
Yeah. So Jimmy, so as we kind of wrap up this conversation, can you provide some words of encouragement with pastors and ministry leaders who are listening or watching along right now?
Yeah. The one thing that's been very, very much in my heart these past months are that there's lots and lots of accusations in life. I mean, there's lots of accusations in life. And there's accusations from Satan. There's accusations from, I think, lots of others. But the one thing that kills pastors is there's a lot of self-accusation. And I think the thing that we need to come back to over and over again, and I think about, I think it's Colossians 2, maybe 14 through 16, is that we can leave those accusations at the cross. Is we can leave all of those accusations of, gosh, I'm not good enough. I'm not smart enough. I can't do these things. I don't know if I'm called to this. I mean, that there's going to constantly be all of those accusations, but that the cross and that calling and that hope is much, much larger than all of those accusations. And so I've got to constantly go back to just the very basics, the cross of Jesus Christ, and say, Father, I thank you that the cross is larger than all of these accusations. And I want to leave these accusations at the foot of the cross, keep my eyes upon you, and do what you have called me to do. and know that my calling is from you. And there's going to be challenging times along the way. There's always going to be things that are hard and challenging, but with my eyes upon you, I don't have to be held captive by all of those accusations. But I mean, like the fact that you free me from those is the greatest news in the world. And yeah, that's just one thought.
Yeah, amen. I love that. Very, very encouraging. Well, brother, it's always good to jump on and chat with you. Certainly appreciate your transparency, sharing from your own experiences, your own life, and in all that you've done in coming alongside pastors and ministry leaders through the ministry of Pastor Serve. And again, for those of you who are pastors and ministry leaders, our coaches would love to offer you a complimentary coaching session. You can find that at pastorserve.org/free session. You can dive into one of these conversations, get a sense and a feel for what that looks like, what that feels like, and have that kind of safe third space where you can go and kind of unpack some things and get some insight. So thank you, Jimmy, for not only hanging out with us today, but thank you for being obedient to the Spirit when God called you to jump out into this adventure of Pastor Serve and step out in faith and really do this, to come alongside pastors. And it's needed more now than ever. But thank you for paving the way and being diligent and obedient for over 2 decades in this work and this service to the kingdom. So love and appreciate you, brother.
Thanks, brother. We're so blessed that you're on the team. You're a tremendous, just a huge piece of this team, and we're so immensely grateful for you. Thank you.
Thank you. God bless you, my friend.
Now, before you go, I want to remind you of an incredible free resource that our team puts together every single week to help you and your team dig more deeply and maximize the conversation that we just had. This is the weekly toolkit that we provide, and we understand that it's one thing to listen or watch an episode, but it's something entirely different to actually take what you've heard, what you've watched, what you've seen, and apply it to your life and to your ministry. You see, FrontStage BackStage is more than just a podcast or YouTube show about ministry leadership. We are a complete resource to help train you and your entire ministry team as you seek to grow and develop in life and ministry. Every single week, we provide a weekly toolkit, which has all types of tools in it to help you do just that. Now, you can find this at pastorserve.org/network. That's pastorserve.org/network. And there you'll find all of our shows, all of our episodes, and all of our weekly toolkits. Now, inside the toolkit are several tools, including video links and audio links for you to share with your team. There are resource links about different resources and tools that were mentioned in the conversation, several other tools, but the greatest thing is the Ministry Leaders Growth Guide. Our team pulls key insights and concepts from every conversation with our amazing guests. And then we also create engaging questions for you and your team to consider and process, providing space for you to reflect on how that episode's topic relates to your unique context at your local church, in your ministry, and in your life. Now, you can use these questions in your regular staff meetings to guide your conversation as you invest in the growth of your ministry leaders. You can find the weekly toolkit at pastorserve.org/network. We encourage you to check out that free resource. Until next time, I'm Jason Daye, encouraging you to love well, live well, and lead well. God bless.